Hello and welcome to Hoffmann-Photography. My name is Rainer, I'm a photographer and photo instructor. In the previous video in this series about lenses, we talked about the least glamorous lenses, the normal lenses. It's time to talk about the most glamorous lenses of them all. Yes, I know that you want one of those beasts. Don't deny it. But they are big, they are heavy, and they are ridiculously expensive. So let's get real. If you aren't a professional sports or wildlife photographer, you won't need one of those lenses. There, I've said it. But a good telephoto lens is a worthwhile addition to your gear. Therefore, let's have a look again at our table of focal lengths and sensor sizes. Technically, all lenses with a focal length longer than the focal length of a normal lens could be considered a telephoto lens. But actually, the visual effect of a 70mm lens is closer to a normal lens than a telephoto lens. Back in the days when we only had prime lenses, a focal length of 135mm was considered the shortest focal length for a real telephoto lens, and in fact it was the first telephoto lens that I could afford. Of course, nowadays zoom lenses are very good and there are some popular telezooms on the market. A very popular range of focal lengths is 70 to 200mm. In fact, these zoom lenses have been around for many years, and one of the first was the now legendary Vivitar Series 1 70 to 210mm from 1972, I believe. Even more popular are the 70 to 300mm lenses that cover quite a large range of focal lengths. If you want even longer focal lengths, there are some 100 to 400mm lenses and even 100 to 500mm lenses around. And there is at least one 150 to 600mm lens. But we are talking serious money here. Of course, the corresponding prime lenses are also still available. Remember that for a smaller sensor, a shorter focal length is required for the same angle of view. For example, on MFT cameras, a 150mm lens has the same angle of view as a 300mm lens on a full-frame camera. When it comes to telephoto lenses, the users of APS-C or MFT cameras have clear advantages. The reason is quite simple. The smaller the sensor and the shorter the focal length, the smaller and lighter the lens. If you are considering to buy a full-frame camera, think again carefully whether you really need that larger sensor or not. When it comes to telephoto lenses, you are usually better off with a smaller sensor. What about the maximum aperture of telephoto lenses? Here's the bad news. The larger the maximum aperture, the bigger, the heavier, and you guessed it, the more expensive the lenses get. Here is a size comparison. Both lenses are 300mm prime lenses, but the one at the top has a maximum aperture of f2.8 and the one at the bottom of f4. That's just one f-stop difference, but what a difference in size and presumably weight. This is a 70 to 200mm zoom lens with a maximum aperture of f2.8 that gives a really shallow depth of field. And that's what I like about this lens very much. But it's big and it's heavy because of that very large maximum aperture of f2.8. And also note that the maximum aperture of f2.8 is constant over the complete range of focal lengths from 70 to 200mm. And that's another reason why this lens is so big and so heavy. Here is an image of a zoom lens with a range of focal lengths from 18 to 300 millimeters. But it doesn't have a constant maximum aperture. Instead, the maximum aperture varies from f3.5 to f5.6. At a focal length of 18 millimeters, the maximum aperture is f3.5, and at 300 millimeters it's f5.6, with intermediate values in between, the shortest and the longest focal lengths. Zoom lenses with a varying maximum aperture are usually smaller, lighter, and cheaper than zoom lenses with a constant maximum aperture. So much for focal lengths and maximum apertures of telephoto lenses. Now let's see how we can use telephoto lenses to good effect. The obvious use for telephoto lenses are subjects that you just can't get close enough to fill the frame, like this football player. Yes, it's a football player, not a soccer player. Or this lioness. And you wouldn't want to get too close to these two guys either. But what really makes telephoto lenses special is what they do to size and distance relationships of objects in the scene. This image of the Sosos fly in Namibia was taken with a focal length of approximately 40 millimeters, almost a normal lens. It shows a distinct foreground, a middle ground, the tree, and a background, the dunes. Objects close to the camera appear large, objects in the distance appear small. That's exactly how the human eye perceives a scene. Compare this to a picture taken with a 300 millimeter lens. In this image, there is no real foreground, and the dunes completely fill the frame. The size relationship between the tree and the dunes is totally off. Note how the tree seems to be very close to the dunes when instead it was several hundred meters in front of them. But the image has a great graphic quality. It is reduced to shapes, lines, and the bold color of the dunes. There's nothing in the picture that distracts the viewer. The next example is perhaps even stronger. This image was taken with a focal length of 100 millimeters. And this one with a 300 millimeter lens. Again, the subject is reduced to shapes and lines, and the image is almost abstract. I quite like this effect that's sometimes called compressed perspective, where objects in the scene seem to be very close together. And that's what really makes telephoto lenses so special as compared to normal lenses. Well, I hope this helped, and as always, thanks for watching.